Right. So, you're not gonna believe this one. I still can't. Honestly, it's the kind of thing you see in a movie, but way dumber because it was me living it. And guess what? People paid the price for you'll see. I'm Alex. By the way, 28. At the time, I was with this National Guard unit deployed to freaking Afghanistan. Not my first rodeo. Which makes it even worse, right? You'd think I'd know better. But love, or whatever twisted thing that was, makes you do stupid stuff. Real stupid stuff. So, there was this guy, Sergeant Miller. We'd been a thing? Hot and heavy. The kind of barracks romance that's a recipe for disaster from the jump. He was infantry, all gung-ho and by the book. Which should have been my first clue we were oil and water. But he was also charming in that rough, military way. And look, out there, you take what you can get. You know, it's not like you're swimming in options. Anyway, we broke up. Messy, as they usually are. He said I was too unpredictable. I said he was boring. Truth is, we both probably had a point. But even after the breakup, there was this weird pull, like unfinished business. And wouldn't you know it, his unit got moved closer to ours. Yeah, different fob, but close enough that rumors traveled fast. Then I heard he'd been out on patrol in some nasty area, the kind where IEDs were practically roadside daisies. And that was it. Something just flipped in my head. All the leftover feelings. The stubbornness, maybe even a little bit of wanting to show him I could be there for him when it counted. It all just boiled over. I had to see him, make sure he was okay. Now, I was a medic. My job was to keep our guys alive, patch them up when things went sideways. Yeah, I had a team, a squad that relied on me. We had orders, a mission. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All I could think about was Miller. I started asking around, playing it casual. Hey, anyone heard anything about 2nd Platoon's last op? Yeah. They were out near. Someone would always have a tidbit. I pieced together where they were likely to be operating next. And then, the absolutely brilliant idea hit me. I'd volunteer for a resupply run heading in that general direction. I talked to Sergeant Davies, my immediate supervisor. I spun some story about needing to deliver extra medical supplies to a forward operating post that was kind of near Miller's AO. I even fudged some paperwork, making it look like it was a higher-up request. Davies was a good guy, maybe a little too trusting. He just nodded and said, "All right, Doc, just make sure you stick with the convoy and report back ASAP." Convoy, plural. That should have been another giant flashing red sign, but I was too focused on my own agenda. We rolled out the next morning, a few Humvees loaded with supplies. I was in the lead vehicle, navigating, except my navigation had very little to do with the actual delivery point and everything to do with trying to intercept Miller's unit. I kept making wrong turns, conveniently ending up on roads that looked vaguely familiar from the snippets I'd overheard. The rest of my team, 3 other medics, were just following my lead, probably assuming I knew what I was doing. Looking back, I cringed so hard. They trusted me, and what was I doing? Chasing after my ex-boyfriend like some lovesick teenager. We got bogged down in some soft sand at one point. Took us a good hour to get the Humvee unstuck. The LT in the second vehicle was starting to get antsy, asking over the radio what the holdup was. I mumbled something about a slight navigational error and promised we were back on track. Liar. Then we heard it. Gunfire. Not close, but definitely in the distance. My heart leaped into my throat. Was that them? Were they taking contact? My slight navigational errors were taking us further and further off our assigned route, leaving us increasingly vulnerable. Suddenly, a call came over the radio, clear and panicked. It was from our base. Medic Team 1, do you copy? We have a situation. Charlie Company is taking heavy fire. Multiple casualties reported. We need immediate medical support. What is your ETA? My blood ran cold. Charlie Company. That was Miller's unit. And we were miles away. Thanks to my selfish detour. I keyed the mic, my voice shaking slightly. This is Medic Team 1. We copy. We've encountered some delays. What's the casualty situation? The voice on the other end was strained. Multiple wounded. At least 1 KIA. They need to dust off ASAP. And you're the closest medical team. What's your location? I stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. A way to explain why we weren't where we were supposed to be. But there was no good explanation. The truth hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with the weight of my stupidity. The LT in the other Humvee was yelling at me over the radio now, demanding to know what was going on. I couldn't lie anymore. Not really. I thought Sergeant Miller's unit might be in this area. I mumbled, the words barely audible. It was silence. A long, deafening silence. Then, the LT's voice, cold and furious, crackled through the speaker. What? You disobeyed direct orders. You took us off route because of your boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. It didn't matter. The damage was done. We were out of position, our team exposed, and other soldiers were paying the price. We finally managed to turn around, tearing back the way we'd come. The LT was driving now, his face like thunder. My team in the back were silent, their eyes on me, a mixture of disbelief and anger in their gaze. I couldn't meet their eyes. I knew what they were thinking. I'd put them in danger. I'd put everyone in danger. We reached the area where Charlie Company had taken contact what felt like an eternity later. The scene was chaos. Wounded soldiers were being dragged to makeshift triage points. The air thick with the smell of smoke and blood. Medics from Miller's unit were overwhelmed, their faces grim. And then I saw him. Miller. He was alive. Thank God. But he was kneeling beside another soldier, a young corpsman I vaguely recognized. The corpsman wasn't moving. His eyes were closed, and there was a dark stain spreading across his chest. Miller looked up as we approached, his expression unreadable, but as his eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of something, not anger, not relief, just disappointment, a deep, soul-crushing disappointment that cut me deeper than any shouting ever could. I rushed over to the corpsman, my training kicking in despite the turmoil in my head. But it was too late. He was gone. A medic from Miller's unit confirmed it, his voice flat. Lost him on the way here. Took shrapnel to the chest. The LT from my convoy came over, his voice low and dangerous. Doc, you and I are going to have a serious conversation when we get back to base. He didn't need to say more. I knew I was in deep trouble. The rest of the day was a blur of treating the wounded, the weight of what I'd done pressing down on me. I saw Miller a few more times, but we didn't speak.
There was nothing to say.
My selfish actions had spoken volumes. Back at base, the fallout was immediate. I was hauled in front of the CO, who was absolutely livid. My fabricated story about the resupply request fell apart under scrutiny. Everyone knew I'd gone off course to find Miller. The official investigation was swift and brutal. I was charged with disobeying a direct order, dereliction of duty, and conduct unbecoming. My security clearance was suspended. I was confined to base, pending further disciplinary action. My team wouldn't even look at me. Sergeant Davies, the guy who'd trusted me, just shook his head in disbelief when he passed me in the hallway. The silence from my fellow medics was deafening, each one a stab of guilt. And Miller, he didn't try to contact me. Not a word. I didn't blame him. What could he say? My obsession had potentially put his entire unit at risk, and it had directly led to the death of one of his core men. The court-martial was a formality.
The evidence against me was overwhelming.
They played the radio recordings, detailing my lies and the frantic calls for medical support that we were too far away to provide in time. The looks on the faces of the officers were withering. I tried to explain. I mumbled something about being worried about Miller, about not thinking clearly, but my words sounded hollow. Even to my own ears, there was no excuse for what I'd done. I'd let my personal feelings completely override my professional responsibilities, with catastrophic consequences. The verdict was swift. Dishonorable discharge. My military career, the one thing I'd actually been good at, was over. Just like that. Gone because of a stupid, selfish impulse. They flew me back stateside, stripped of my rank and my uniform. I landed in Dallas with nothing but the clothes on my back and a black mark on my record that would follow me for the rest of my life. Did I learn my lesson? Did I suddenly become a responsible, accountable person? Nope, not really. I still think they overreacted. I was just worried about someone I cared about. They didn't see it that way. Of course, they kept hopping on the chain of command and lives at stake. Dramatic much. Miller probably moved on. Found some nice, stable woman who didn't pull idiotic stunts on deployment. Not good for him. As for me, well, no one from my old unit keeps in touch. Surprise. I tried reaching out to a few of them on Facebook, sending those generic "hey, long time no see" messages. Most of them didn't even respond. The few who did were polite but distant. The message was clear. I was dead to them, and I ended up bouncing around a few dead-end jobs. No one wants to hire someone with a dishonorable discharge. Explaining that in an interview is always a blast. So, why did you leave the military? Oh, just a little misunderstanding involving a battlefield, my ex, and a dead corpsman. Yeah, that usually goes over real well. Eventually, I moved to Phoenix, trying to start fresh somewhere where no one knew my name. I still think about that deployment sometimes. About Miller, about the corpsmen. Do I feel guilty? Maybe a little, but honestly, I mostly feel like everyone else blew it out of proportion. If they just understood how worried I was, maybe things would have been different. They should have had my back, but they didn't. They never do. And that's probably why I'm here, alone in a dusty apartment in Arizona, still trying to figure out why everyone else is always the problem.